right, we're going to start.
Okay, Chair.
Good evening and welcome to this September 18th school committee meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting, the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. We will start with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Dr. Carmona, will you call the roll?
Dr. Ackman, Mayor Valentine, Mrs. Piton,
Here.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Mrs. Dion,
Here.
Mrs. Barish,
Here.
President Owen Campen, Dr. Phillips,
Here.
Chair Krebschen.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. And am I introducing interpreters? Yes. Okay. I will start with Spanish. Spanish interpreter, are you here? Should I?
Good evening, team. This is Spanish interpreter Tracy.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you, Ben.
Okay, very good. Okay.
So why don't we have the Spanish interpreter introduce themselves first and just tell people how you can access the Spanish. Spanish interpreter, please try again.
They should be able to unmute themselves.
Portuguese interpreter, would you like to try?
they put information in the chat.
Okay, so there is information in the chat if you need translation services. That brings us to public comment. I will read our public comment guidelines just because we changed them in the spring. We do have one person signed up for public comment. Welcome and thank you to those who have signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. Speakers
Haitian
should-
Creole interpreter Cynthia.
Sorry about that. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their roles within the districts. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace, or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school community in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals and policies, or role of the superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion in the public record. And with that, Aili Contini Field.
Good. My name is Aili Contini Field. I live at 215 Summer Street in Ward 3, and I am a parent of 2 Winter Hill students. I'm speaking here on behalf of the families in our Winter Hill Facebook group, which I co-admin. First, thank you to everyone who has helped make the transition to Edgerly possible. The building seems to be in reasonably good shape, given what you started with in June of this year. Some of our classroom spaces are even nicer and brighter than their counterparts at 115 Sycamore, such as the music and drama spaces, which now have windows, though our students continue to grieve the absence of a playground. Winter Hill is not on school committees or the district's agenda tonight, but Winter Hill families are continuing to struggle with the logistics of making our way across McGrath Highway to Edgerly. Starting last Monday, the district has been providing 1 round of buses from 115 Sycamore over to Edgerly for a limited number of students in grades pre-K to 5. We're grateful for the buses, not least because we hope the total level of traffic chaos for teachers and families going directly to Edgerly is reduced. However, we would appreciate seeing these concerns about the bus addressed as soon as possible. Most importantly, the bus timing is such that all students taking the bus are late for school every day. Even though they're not being officially marked tardy, it's disruptive and unfair to teachers that a significant chunk of the classes, especially in grades 1 through 3, are missing the morning lineup and entering classrooms up to 10 minutes late. Currently, the buses sit empty until close to 8 o'clock while the students gather on the basketball court and aides attempt to take attendance while the students mill around. The buses are then loaded and set off from 115 Sycamore towards Edgerly as late as 8:09 a.m. We ask that you allow students to arrive and get seated directly on the bus and have the bus monitors take attendance as they enter. This will reduce the amount of milling around and has the added benefit of keeping them out of the elements, such as the driving rain this morning, while they're waiting for the bus to leave. We understand you're using extant MLE buses, and therefore there is a time crunch between ending one loop and getting in place for the next. But it seems that the buses are present as early as 7:50 but stay empty. If Edgerly is the district's solution for next year as well, when instructional time is slated to start 10 minutes earlier than at present, there's absolutely fuzzy math happening in terms of getting students settled and ready for learning. There's also little opportunity for students who take the bus to eat breakfast, except by eating grab-and-go type snacks in the classroom during instructional time, which we heard from teachers is difficult because the classrooms at Edgerly are carpeted and they're worried about vermin. Also regarding inclement weather, if we cannot have students entering the buses directly, and the district continues to ask that parents wait with them until all students are loaded together, it would be very helpful for the district to bring back the tent on the 115 Sycamore basketball court. This would keep students from wandering away to seek shelter under the 115 Sycamore overhang when it's raining or snowing, which increases the chaos and slows down the loading time. Please also proactively direct DPW to keep the basketball court and Sycamore Street sidewalk clear of snow and ice throughout this winter, even though 115 Sycamore as a building is not being used by students. With the return to 115 Sycamore as a space for children to gather, we would like to see a crossing guard posted at Medford and Sycamore Street again. There was a bad crash at this intersection last week, only a few minutes before the bus arrived to drop students. We understand our beloved Stephen has retired, but if he wants to come back, we'd be happy to see him. We could also use a crossing guard at the intersection of Central Street and the new community path. The timing of the buses in the afternoon is also difficult for families who are receiving children from both Capilano and Edgerly. In some cases last week, families had to wait for 90 minutes at 115 Sycamore because of the difference in the shuttle arrival between the pre-K and K and the older students. It's also not clear who the contact person is during the purgatory period after 2:35 p.m. for children who are waiting for the shuttle to arrive. We heard last week that many of our middle schoolers are crossing unaccompanied at McGrath at Broadway because our 7th and 8th graders are being told to essentially go fish in terms of getting themselves to school. We also have families of younger students who would prefer a shuttle seat but are being told there are no more seats available. We have families who are currently taking up seats that don't necessarily need them every day, but they're anxious that if they don't show up, the seat will be lost for the rest of the year. We have families that want to participate in the early morning box gym program on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, but they cannot choose the bus only on Mondays and Fridays, and therefore they're opting out of box entirely. The most robust solution, especially if we're going to be at Edgerly for multiple years, as we heard at the last school committee meeting, is for the district to provide sufficient buses to meet the demand for all ages of students, for those buses to be contracted all year despite possible variations in numbers from week to week, and for those buses to arrive at 115 Sycamore early enough that they will regularly arrive at Edgerly by 8:05 a.m. Thank you for your time.
Okay, that brings us to the report of the superintendent. Dr. Cremona.
Good evening, everyone. So I have in the report two things. One is my entry plan and the school goal, the superintendent's goals, as well as the update that we always provide the school committee. So I'm gonna direct you to the entry plan as well as the goals, and you have those two documents and a guide to a meaningful and manageable evaluation process. So those are the three documents that you will need. And so before I get going into the content of these documents, I also need to preface this conversation or this report by grounding the work of teacher evaluation, or grounding the work similar to the work that we do with teacher evaluation and principal evaluation, that often we try to prioritize what's the most important thing, so we actually remain focused. The same thing we ask principals to do with the teachers, and the idea is to make sure that as we look at the overall menu of goals that we're responsible for, that I am asking the committee to weigh the goals that are related to our instructional priorities a little bit more than the other goals. Again, it's an idea of being targeted and being focused around the things that matter the most for us as a district. So I'm going to direct you to look at the actual entry plan. In the entry plan, by the way, I made some adjustments on the pictures. I try not to have any more pictures with mask, and so there is a revised document. So I didn't want to print this out again, but I can give you access via online. But the structure of the entry plan is based on a couple of things. First is the core values that I'm trying to share with the community, and then the goals, the phases of each of this process, as well as the key activities and steps. So I'm going to delve a little bit into the actual goals, and there are 4 critical goals for this entry process. And the first one is to foster strong and effective working relationships with the district leadership teams, staff, students, and families. The second goal is to cultivate strategic partnerships and relationships with stakeholders. The third one is to develop a shared understanding of the district's strengths, challenges, and opportunities. And the last one is to collaborate with the school committee to set short and long-term goals. Now, it is important that if you're going to give me meaningful feedback, that you will have the time to read this at your leisure. So most likely, if you have any feedback, we might not be able to do it during this session, but we will determine what's the best structure for you to provide feedback. Again, the idea of goals and corrective feedback is something that I take seriously, is something that I actually have worked since I was a teacher. I thought that as a coach, you always have to be able to point exactly how to do the next move to improve your practice. So I expect that I hope that you can provide me equal time and effort so I can be so this process can be meaningful. The second part of this entry plan is these phases. There are 4 phases as well. So the first one is about research and gathering data and perspectives. The second one is about synthesizing that research that is coming through different means to assess the current reality of our district. And phase number 3 is creating a strategic plan, not necessarily a full-blown strategic plan, but at least a plan that sets strategic objectives for the district. There are a few adjustments on the actual dates. On phase 2, it would be impossible for me to have a synthesis of the research by December. So I made a change, and it should be October to February. And the same phase 3 strategy starts in February to June. And the last phase is phase number 4, which is evaluate and monitor. This is an ongoing process. It will allow us to continuously reflect on the progress as well as make adaptations as we go. So the last part of this process is the key activities and steps, and it's basically the nitty-gritty of what are some of the things that we're going to do collectively from my office and my team to make sure that we engage not only the community but collect information, assess it, and also determine next steps. I also include an example of entry questions and interview questions. These are not probably you would say that the most sophisticated questions, but it's the result of some questions that have been used in the past by colleagues as well as different groups that work in this kind of processes, open to suggestions in terms of the tools that we're using to gather information. So that is the entry plan in a nutshell. Again, I think it requires for you to take a little bit of time and just to provide some corrective feedback at some point. So I'm going to switch to the goals. There's a second document in your packet, and that is basically is not a compilation of the entry plan, but is more of a reflection of how to embed those into more traditional structures like actions and benchmarks. So if you look at the goals, they also have key indicators, focus indicators that are some of the key indicators that we're trying to establish as a community. I know last time we were here, there was a conversation about culturally proficiency communication and culturally proficient practices. So those are part of the indicators that we outline under the different goals. So the goal number 1 is effective entry and direction setting. So we not only have to outline what it is that we want to do for this year, but the years to come, and also make sure that we continue to run the district in a way that is efficient and also grounded in our values. So there are the key actions and benchmarks. Again, the benchmarks are basically the tools we're going to use to determine that we are inching up towards the achievement of our goals. Goal number 2 is about maintaining the momentum during the transition, and is basically juggling all the balls up in the air and doing the things that need to be done while looking at what is our compass for the future. So the key actions are outlined there, the benchmarks as well, and also the standards that will be addressed as we look at the work and do the work. And the last goal is related to the work that I am doing as a new superintendent, which is the induction program. And basically it requires that I do the work of the induction, attend the different meetings, and also work with my coach on a regular basis. The overall assessment of the goals and the entry plan requires that we as a collective think about where are we heading as a district, and I want you to think about what are the ways in which this work can be done, maximizing the resources that we have, as well as making sure that we are true to the values that we are outlining as a community. Again, as I said earlier, there is a document here which is a guide that can help us or can help you ground the work. I also mentioned that it makes sense to make sure that we prioritize those goals and categories or areas of focus that are related to our vision and mission.
With that, I will open it up to questions and comments. Mr. Green and then Ms. Patel.
I'm never through you to the superintendent, I'm never the guy who wants to start with thanks, but I really want to take a moment to appreciate how systemic and holistic this is. Like, it's quite clear that you're starting with the end in mind, that you're making sure that all of the systems that go into this are talking to each other from the beginning, which will make our lives all much easier in the months and years to come. So I want to appreciate that. On a lighter note, I really would appreciate you making the change to the timeline, because when I first saw it and I saw December, I was like, he does know that, like, Thanksgiving through the end of the year is just survival in a school district, right? Like, there's no planning in that month, they're just getting through it. So I appreciate the more realistic timeline. And I guess my only real question is a sub-timeline question, like, when and how do you plan on sharing who your thoughts are as to the kind of stakeholders you want to talk to are with committees, so that we can perhaps give some insight, share our experiences, and maybe help you flesh out that list of interviews for stakeholders?
I'm sorry, Mr. Green, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, I'm just curious to know when and how you plan on sharing with the committee your thoughts as to who the stakeholders are you're going to interview, so that we can, perhaps give some guidance and help from our experience with people you perhaps should talk to and make the list.
Great question. So the next part of the work is basically breaking down all the components, because this is impossible for me to do this by myself. So breaking down the components with the executive team and identify basically who are the multiple key stakeholders that are critical in this process, and those who are not critical, or that are critical but are historically not been included in the process. That is a good question. I think that in collaboration with my team, in collaboration with the community, with the school committee, I know that the different departments at the SPS that are very hold a lot of knowledge, like SFLC, enrollment, HR. Every one of those departments have information to share. So my strategy is to through the executive team also determine what's the list of folks that need to be part of this process. But I'm open to names, and I think we have done that in the past. Many of you have come to me and say, hey, you gotta meet this person. And so I think that is a collective effort. I'm not, I am not married to any one strategy, but I do feel that it behooves us that in order for us to be clear, transparent, and also intelligent about this, is that I need to gather as many key stakeholders in this process.
And just before we continue, a word on process. The plan is to have this on the agenda at our next meeting, and at that point, we will be voting on it. So just so everyone is clear on the process. Ms. Baton.
Thank you, through you, Chair Kripchen. I think I have questions for the chair as well as for the superintendent. My question to the chair is about the evaluation process. So in general, I'm not saying we should do it the way we've done in the past. Someone on the school committee is responsible for coordinating the evaluation process. And usually what you do is you have a set criteria that you establish now. And I think this is sort of a draft. There's elements in here that's a draft, but it also, I want to, behoove on the members that, we have the authority to decide whether or not these are the right ones, we want to add things, we want to take things away. So that I want to make sure that members understand that this is our job to do the evaluation, and though that this has been served up and it's fantastic, I think we need to put in some time into our long range or whatever agenda you want to put in where we actually deliberate on this, as opposed to kind of, well, I guess we could bless it as it is. But I do think that it's one of our number one, besides hiring a superintendent, doing a really good job of evaluating, is something that really takes deep work. It's more than, okay, this looks lovely, let's check it off and approve it. It is, all right, let's think about what our community needs, what we think is important, and align on that. So I just wanted to give that, so I'm curious about what the timeline, and sometimes it's the vice chair, sometimes it's someone else that gets identified as being the point person to coordinate that effort.
I appreciate you flagging it, and I will say that because we didn't evaluate last year because we had an interim and we were remote the previous year, I feel like my time on school committee, I haven't really done the work. So I appreciate you flagging it for me. I don't have an answer, but I will think about that and bring it up when we bring this up again at our next meeting.
Okay, that's great.
And then did you have a question?
Yeah. So there were a couple things in here that I was just going to, I haven't done my deepest look at this, but I have looked through it. One item that's, I think, in the memo version document is a reference to key actions, school improvement plans. So we generally have worked on a cycle where like the first quarter is when those school improvement plans get presented, like January, February, they get presented to the school committee. Here you have a cycle where you're going to update the school improvement plans at the end of the school year. So if we're adjusting our timeline, I think it's important that this body is okay with that. And it may be the right timeline that you're proposing, but that's something that maybe, not tonight if you guys are not prepared, but Dr. Boston Davis or Mr. Mazza could talk a little bit about how we've done it in the past and how that part of the plan works with this plan. Does that make sense? So it's just, it looks like the timing has been shifted out. And so if that's what we want to do, let's be intentional about it, or, let's stick with our normal timeline and see how that fits into here.
Through the chair, can I? So two things. Let me speak to the timing because there is something behind that, and I think I'm glad you caught that up. So two things. One is, I think clarity is kind. I think that what you said earlier on about making sure that we norm around what we're looking for, because we have 9 people in this body, and then for what one person might look proficiency, another one might say, that's subpar for me. And so I think this idea of like norming around this, making sure that all of you have a good aligned measure for what good looks like is critical. And that's actually the same thing we do when it comes to teacher evaluation, is how are we being fair in terms of the process. And I think that is a good point. It takes time to really dig into what is it that we're really asking for. What are we setting our wheels in what direction? The second piece is school improvement plans were probably, my assumption, like in every district, they were made at the end of last year and then set up in motion for the next year. So I came in and most of the school improvement plans are already in place. Is that right? So if you look at the website, all of them are 23, 25. So most of the school improvement plans already are in motion. It is critical, though, as we fine-tune our instructional priorities, that we also make sure that there is an alignment across the board. If anything, is that we have to have a sense of alignment. I'm not saying there is not. I'm not saying we are there, but I do feel that there is a process for me to engage with every building to make sure that that alignment is clear to all of us. So I don't know if that answers the question about the timing of when that is done or not. I just know that you are asking me to be responsible for the education of 5,000 kids, and as well as 1,000 employees. Not at the education, but the engagement of those 1,000 employees, and they have the resources and tools to do the work that they need to do. That I take it seriously. And so I cannot endorse, or not endorse, it's not an issue of endorsement, but it's my job to make sure that we align our lenses towards the direction of where we want to go as a community.
Ms. Jones, do you want to follow up?
Yes, through you, Chair Krupchen. Yes, and I think my question was really about timing, and sort of timing in the past. And I can totally see we could maintain our normal timing where we do the plans, earlier in the 2024, like January, February, March. And then as you're going through this process, there will be adjustments to it, and those get shared. But the question was really like, how does the team really plan on doing it this year? Because we had a timeline we used to work on. If this changes or not changes it, we just want to hear and know. So our expectations are set.
Like Mr. Tone, I look forward to discussing especially the memo and the evaluation process in some greater depth at a later meeting. But I will say on this topic, the way I originally read it, and if I may be wrong too, is that this is as fulfillment of the initial entry plan and making sure that our existing plans are in alignment with that, which may or may not be the same as a systems change to how we do school improvement plans going forward, which I would agree with Mr. Tone. If we were going to do that, it would be a decision about how this body best uses its time. Although I will say that my gut says that our traditional method of doing it was just that traditional. So like I would be open to a change if it actually made school improvement plans more productive than I think they currently are. But I think that's still separate from what I think is the right approach for a new superintendent to take, is to make sure that the existing things are in alignment with with the plan we hired him to implement.
Dr. Phillips?
Thanks, through you, Chair. I think this plan and the goals are super well done. And I have some minor comments, and I don't know if you want them now, you want them in an email. What would be the best way to share feedback on this plan?
I think if they're just minor comments, you should just email them to Dr. Carmona. If they're discussion points, then bring them up now. You agree?
Through the chair, I think that that's the best way. Again, I think feedback is important, but I won't capture it here right under this condition. So email probably will be a more slow churning thinking process. Yeah.
Make a suggestion?
Mr. Green and then Dr. Phillips?
I think if there are things that we as a body want to deliberate, flagging them and so they can actually be on the agenda for our next meeting so that we can all think about them might be more helpful than just kind of spitballing them now. That's my thinking.
To Mr. Green's point, email your feedback to myself and Dr. Carmona, and that way I can go through and see if there's themes or things we should discuss versus just an edit to something. And Dr. Phillips?
Thanks, that's really helpful. The one thing that I think might be useful to raise here now is that the strategic planning process, which I agree we need one, we should have a limited number of priorities, doesn't yet reference the school committee goals here, and bringing those two into alignment at some point in the process seems like a critical action step not to miss.
Dr. Carmona?
Through the chair. Good point. I think that there is a couple of things that are not in this document. Not in the document because of the nature of the document. So if you look at our instructional priorities, it's another set of documents that encompass a lot of this information. So I didn't break this down into the inners of the actual instructional priorities, but they are spread out into that diagram that we shared with one of the committees at some point, but it is there. So I can make sure that they address the goals that are established by the school committee. Yeah.
Ms. Patton?
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. I think this is a little bit related to Dr. Phillips' comment. In the document, the longer document with the pictures, there's a reference to collaborating with school committee on short-term and long-term goals, but then there's also a section that references developing strategic objectives with corresponding strategic goals to share with the committee for feedback. So those to me are kind of two different actions. Generally, what we've done in the past is the goals are done as a collaborative effort between the superintendent's office. So the superintendent actually usually brings in other talent besides themselves, where we sit with the school committee and actually go through a process of prioritizing things where you're sharing the data and you're sharing where you are. So it's just kind of language here that was a little bit it said two different things. And this is the space, again, where the school committee really does have, it's important for us to retain our responsibility and accountability on this kind of work in terms of the school committee basically saying what we feel like, in collaboration, obviously, what the goals are, as opposed to goals being brought to us and we provide feedback. So that's just some language or some intent that I'm curious about, or you don't have to speak to it. That's my thoughts.
Do you want to speak to that now?
Through the chair. If you could flag those inconsistencies, that would be great. I kind of vaguely understand what you're saying, but I'm still wondering what that actually means. So, but yes.
Mr. Green.
I just put on Ms. Patone's point, and to remind this body and the central office, we as a body made a conscious decision to reaffirm and edit our goals last year, in part to make it clear for an incoming superintendent that we had a commitment to moving forward in these stations. And I think it makes sense as part of the plan to look at that, maybe emphasize things. But this body was intentional in saying to whoever the next superintendent would be that we are not giving up moving forward on equity. We actually constantly voted to reaffirm those things.
Through the chair. So I believe that the emphasis that we are putting in equity is, I think we are trying to notch up that actual statement around equity, but is equity in action, because I feel that we all can be very lofty about some ideas, but when it comes to the action itself, we fall short. And so I always keep on saying that we don't rise to the level of our goals, but we fall to the level of our systems. And so I am really interested in seeing how do these ideas around equity are really represented in policies and structures that we have. So I think I'm true to there's some language that might be different, and I think that I don't know when is the time to talk about that. I am not shortchanging any of the goals that the school committee has set out, but I do have some take on those that are a little bit different, and I'm glad that you mentioned it, because I definitely feel that I would like to at some point have a conversation about that.
Dr. Phillips?
And I also want to say, right, I think the goals that we approved last year are a living document. And so I don't want to speak for the body, but if the strategic plan identifies 3 priorities that are not these, I think the school committee wants to have a conversation to make sure that the goals we have are aligned with those 3 priorities. So just wanting to point out, alignment is good, but we are not wedded to what we have decided in the past, I don't think.
Through the chair.
Yep.
So I take this process of research and synthesis as a true process of research and synthesis. So I'm hoping that process will yield some outcomes. It could be that there are a few places where we have to name things differently, but I'm not anticipating that that's the direction. But I do feel that, if we're engaging on some kind of a semi-research process, that some of those outcomes will hopefully allow us to reflect on the current existing goals that we have.
After all, the point of research is you don't know what the outcome is going to be, by definition. Are there other questions or comments? If not, we will table this to our next meeting for further deliberation and a vote. With that, there is more to your district report, correct?
That is correct. So we have the part of the district report that is always good news and information that is really puts some flavor into, or some color into, the work that we currently do on a daily basis. So first of all, we just got to remind everyone that we were off to an exciting start this school year. And on Thursday, we actually have a joint panel discussion with our career and technical education staff and educators. We addressed a delegation of about 60 business leaders and educators from Gwinnett County, Georgia's Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to learn what we consider success for our students, how do we leverage industry partnerships to ensure success. Our CTE department is a great example of how we use hands-on learning, put that learning into context, and prepare our students for successfully navigating life after graduation. It was fun to share some of the extraordinary work being done by our staff and educators at Somerville High School. I was there. It was actually at Assembly Row, beautiful hotel, and it was quite impressive to see that there was an entire room full with folks who are interested in really learning about our experience. Now, Gwinnett County is at close to 200,000 students compared to Somerville, with 5,000. We are puny in comparison to them, but they were so enthralled to hear what we have to say and the model that we have at the high school for CTE. It is not perfect, but I can tell you that they really were very interested in leveraging the relationships between the business partners and the district. So that was very exciting. We also had a delegation from Brazil, from Boa Vista, Brazil, and they actually wanted to learn from the Unidos program at the East Somerville School. It was great to know that, well, it wasn't great to know that they're struggling with the influx of new immigrants from Venezuela, but they share similar challenges in terms of having to educate students who are in the process of becoming bilingual, and they wanted to learn from our system. So that was very exciting. They were very humble, and I just love the idea of Somerville being a role model and a sample for not only places in our country, but outside of our country. And I also have to celebrate a couple of things. So we're lucky to have a diverse, multicultural community in Somerville. There are several events that community members and students will observe over the next few weeks. Hispanic Heritage Month, which started September 15, and there are opportunities to celebrate in our schools and in the city. Tomorrow, September 19, is the Hindi celebration Ganesh Chaturthi, and our Jewish community observes Yom Kippur on Monday, September 25, and Sukkot from September 30th to October 6th. Many Sunni Muslims observe Milan and Nabi on September 26 to 27, and I would like to extend my support to our students and families on Bi Visibility Day, which is Saturday, September 23rd. I'm going to ask Assistant Superintendent for Operations Chad Maza and Assistant Superintendent for Instruction Jessica Boston Davis to continue to share some other updates.
All right, through the chair, free MBTA passes for our students in grades 7 through 12. We're going to have free passes again this year, and schools have already begun to distribute these passes. Very exciting. Then school meals are permanently free. Breakfast and lunch, free. And I advise and recommend people check out the Food and Nutrition Services Department page on our website to learn more information. And then our last thing is special education virtual job fairs. We have 2 virtual job fairs coming up, one September 20th and the other September 28th from 8:30 to noon, and instructions for signing up for a time slot to talk to our amazing special educators can be found on our website. So lots of great news. Dr. Boston Davis.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to remind everyone that upcoming half-days, in terms of upcoming half-days in the school holidays, that the remaining 2 weeks in September follow the regular school day calendar or schedule. Also, we have one shout out for today around the NEASC report submission stage being complete. So we want to give a shout out. We want to give a huge shout out and congratulations to the Somerville High School administrators and educators for moving that reaccreditation process forward. For the last year, the administrators worked with the New England Association of School and Colleges, NEASC. Our staff developed a detailed report about Somerville High School, then hosted a team of NEASC professionals from other districts during the collaborative conference. The collaborative conference team submitted a final report, and staff will use that report as a blueprint to achieve the reaccreditation. The suggested areas of focus in the report align with the internally developed goals, and you can find the report on the Somerville High School website. And we want to just say every department at Somerville High School worked on a section of the report, and so thank you to Principal Alicia Kirsten, retired Principal Sibila Gambina for their work on this, along with Megan Spinelli, Tanya Connor, Megan McDevitt, Jim Hatchie, Trish Murphy, Marie Foreman, Jody Remington, and Nicole Veely. And a huge, huge thank you to Lisa Brewster Cook, who spent months organizing and editing the report to present to the collaborative conference.
That is the end of our district report.
I have a quick comment, and then I'll call Ms. Dan. The part where you talk about how we don't have any more half-day Wednesdays just reminded me that we should start talking about next year and getting people accustomed to the change for the half-day Wednesdays for next year. Ms. Dion.
I'm really intrigued about this panel that you did for people from Georgia and this delegation from Brazil. Did they come here like just to speak with you, or like were they like, and like did you invite them here? Like I'm intrigued. Like I'm intrigued and want to hear more.
Through the chair. So the Gwinnett County delegation was, they came to Boston, and there's another city that they wanted to see as a model. But they also were, I think we were the cherry on top of the ice cream, is that what you said? Wow. Because of our size and the new school, and also the fact that in Gwinnett, what happens is that they have vocational schools as a separate thing, and so we have it embedded in our system. So they were really intrigued about how is that possible. So that was part of their call. They actually do this. They go throughout the state and overseas as well. So I was really impressed with the way they configured this work. The business, I mean, there's like probably 50 businesses from all different kind of businesses, and they were really interested in resolving the challenges that they have by investing in CTE. That was really encouraging for us, so we actually were thinking, so what else can we do so we can actually continue to deliver upon the promise of better education through CTE? So that was one, and then the other one I think is there's a Harvard professor who does Brazilian studies, and she has a relationship with some folks in Brazil, and so they were looking for ways to address the challenges that they're facing. And so the mayor was here, the Boa Vista, Brazil mayor was here, and a large delegation as well. And they wanted to see what it looks like when you provide instruction into different languages.
Wow.
So that was really exciting. I have to say that was the highlight of my day, yeah.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Thank you.
Sounds like sometimes your job is fun. Are there any other questions or comments from the district report? Seeing none, that brings us to new business. Oh, and just so everyone knows, I am aware that we haven't approved minutes in a while between the changeover in staff and some issues with the email that happened. We're working on it. We will have them soon, but just so everyone knows, I have not forgotten. That brings us to the ratification of the Somerville Municipal Employee Association Unit C School Nurses Contract. Mr. Green.
I move to authorize the chair to sign the MOU between the Somerville School Committee and the Somerville Municipal Employees Association Unit C.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Now we have some graduates to approve. I will entertain a motion. Oh, yeah.
I move to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve diplomas for Brandon Damian Philippe and Rafael Carranza Lopez.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Now we have, congratulations to Brandon and Raphael. Well done.
Through the chair, I just wanted to also congratulate them officially. So I didn't know that was part of this process or at the end, but yeah, so Brandon and Damian Felipe and Rafael Carranza Lopez, congratulations wherever you are out there. I know that sometimes we take different pathways to get to where we need to, but congratulations and enjoy that great accomplishment.
That brings us to field trips. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve on September 20th to 21st, 28 fifth grade students from the Brown School to attend an overnight trip to Nature's Classroom at the cost of $180 per student. Expenses were covered by parents and PTA, and the attendees will travel by bus.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Ms. Barish. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. And then Ms. Pachon.
Through you, Chair Krupchen, I just want to make the request that we get these approvals sooner. So, we were fortunate that we had this meeting tonight, but in the past, occasionally we've had to schedule separate meetings. So I just want to encourage, there's generally a process and a timeline where, a month before or 6 or 8 weeks, whatever it is, that I think whether or not it's the administration needs to be reminded of that would be really important, because obviously we as school committee bend over backwards, and if we have to have a separate meeting, we will definitely have it. We never want to hold up trips, but process will help avoid that. So thank you.
Through the chair, I know I think this came late, as I believe, and I think that when this came to us, there was a lot of remorseful recognition. I think that everyone is fully aware of that, and so usually a natural consequence is that if something is too late, you miss it. But unfortunately, when it comes to a field trip, it's hard to say, we're going to establish a natural consequence here. So that was the reason for that. So there are human errors, and we are fully aware that there's a timing for this. So unfortunately, this time came late, and so it was unfortunate. But again, a natural consequence could not be applied in this case. Yeah.
Ms. Pachon?
I may be wrong, but I actually think there's like a procedure or a documented process on this, so it's an opportunity to send it out again to all the administrators and say, guess what, when you have this, because this trip was planned months ago. These trips don't come out of nowhere, so that's all. And again, it's more about not wanting to stress anybody out, because the school committee will do whatever they can do to make sure that these trips happen.
Mr. Mazza?
So through the chair, the I don't want to say difficulty, but it was a little challenging because we wanted to bring this to you last June because we knew that we would be coming close to the deadline, and for some reason that didn't happen. So yes, there is a procedure. We spoke about making sure that those procedures are followed, and we'll reiterate that to our principals, but for the most part they do. I think this one was a little trickier just because of the timing, but point taken, absolutely.
Mr. Green?
I just want to also, especially for people staying at home, also distinguish between trips like this, which, again, there should be a procedure for, we know about in advance, and the things that come up, like sometimes a team advances to a national or regional thing, they have to go out of state. That sometimes does come up same week, and for those things, I would love to create a procedure so that we don't have to do the scramble meetings. At least now that now we can do it remotely, it's a little easier than it was when we'd have to find ways to meet together for 5 minutes somewhere to meet. But yeah, I just want to say for the people at home that they're the meeting, this field trips we know are coming, we should follow our procedure, and then the ones that we have to respond to rapidly.
Yep, Ms. Pachon?
And just a quick, through the chair, just a quick follow-up. It's trips that are overnight and trips that are out of state. So those are the only ones that come through the school committee.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Have fun to the 28 fifth graders from the Brown going to Nature's Classroom. Now I will accept a motion on grants.
I move to accept all federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools. A private grant, Fidelity Charitable Donor Advised Fund, to be used for the Unified Basketball Team, Special Education Department Head, Somerville High School, in the amount of $4,000.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Dion, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any discussion? Ms. Parrish?
Yeah, I wondered if anyone could speak a little bit about what the unified basketball team is. I think I know a little bit about it, but if any of you folks know about it, that'd be great.
Thank you, through the chair. So actually, I also am very excited about this. I don't know as much about this grant, but I am happy to follow up and kind of put it in a memo for our next meeting or just send it to the body.
All right. Any other questions or concerns? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to items from board members. Mr. Green?
This is in part because we have them, it came up today, and I was curious. So when we approve a non-standard diploma, like we did for today for Mrs. Felipe and Lopez, what's the process afterwards? Like, how are they notified?
Mr. Mazza?
Through the chair, the school gets in touch with them and lets them know that they, did receive their diplomas. So there's a process.
Mr. Green?
I would love if we could figure out some way to make that more celebratory than just a random call from a secretary, especially since, to the superintendent's very good point, these are by and large people who got there usually overcoming some kind of hardship in a non-traditional way. So I'd love if we could think about some way to just make it a little bit more celebratory.
Through the chair, maybe we invite them to a meeting, and I think that would be pretty amazing, because it's still, whether you achieve it in June or over the summer, you're still achieving it. So I think that's something that we can talk about. Sure.
We could get a cake. I just like an excuse for a cake. Why not? Yes, Dr. Heckman.
Thank you. Through the chair to the district, someone had gotten in touch with me, and it's very preliminary about the possibility of bringing sort of biotech to our CTE program. The second I heard about it, the person is a Somerville teacher or educator, but the second I heard about it, it just seems like such an ideal fit for this part of the country, world, whatever we want to say, so I don't know how to get that started, but I think it would be amazing.
Okay. That actually just brought up a thought, because we were talking about CTE and that in the back of my head, at some point many years ago, I read an article about a school that had a bank in the school. And so I'm just throwing out that idea too. That would be an amazing CTE program, if we're just throwing out ideas. So there you have it. Yeah. Any other items from board members? Biotech and a bank. Oh, yes, of course.
Thank you, through the chair. Dr. Ackman, if you send me the information, I can make sure to connect that with Jim Hatchie to make sure, the idea connects, and we can move forward with a conversation from there.
Thank you, Dr. Basta-Davis. I will gladly do that.
Dr. Kamara?
Through the chair. So just so you know, getting someone to do advanced technology manufacturing was empty for quite some time. I talked to Jim and I said, let's just start, let's solve the problem. So we finally have someone there. We're now missing someone in electrical, I think. So if you know of a teacher who also comes along with that offer, it would be great, because that is very painful to really hire good qualified folks who can do the work.
Mr. Green?
I guess the good news on that front is that there have been layoffs because there's a biotech training glut currently. This is something I know my day job. So if we move on it now, there are people who are available.
Cup half full. I like it. Are there any other items from board members? All right, that brings us to condolences. Dr. Phillips?
Won't have any this week, but I expect we'll have some at the next meeting.
Okay. With that, then, we are adjourned.